Hello, Outliers. Very glad to be with you today. Do you know what today is? Today is a very special birthday, and for some of you, the start of spring break. I know it's been a little while since we've seen each other. Well, I was hoping to see you because I wanted to celebrate two very special people today. One is the birthday today of a very, very special man, and the other, the life of a wonderful, very special, loving woman who stood by, respected, and supported that man, even with her own life and her own talents, her own responsibilities. When she lost him, she continued his legacy, and she helped run it, even when she lost a husband of 50 years. I'd like to talk to you about Reverend Fred Rogers, or better known as Mr. Rogers, and Joanne Rogers.
Now, this is my wife and two sons. I want you to meet them. Come in.
Hi, Dad.
John Rogers, hi.
Hi, Dad.
Jamie Rogers. Hi, Troy. Like to know my friend, it's Mrs.
Sad truth is, I knew very little about him when he was alive. Rest in peace. He was a very special man, and I didn't even know he and I had more in common than I realized. He was born in 1928, March 20th, if I remember correctly, in a small town called Latrobe, Pennsylvania, my home state. That was where I was born as well, and he had gone to college to be a minister. And it's very interesting that he would transfer out and go to Rollins College, where he'd meet a very special lady, but don't want to get it too far ahead. Within the time of his college, I believe it was 53, and also in the 60s, he began pursuing television. He began looking at networks, NBC, and then I don't know all the networks he got involved with when he finally got his own children's television show. And the reason that this mattered to him, especially after he had been ordained as a minister, what his plan was, in order to become a minister and help children, television was very new. When he was an adult, it was this brand new thing, and he saw it like as slapstick, and it bothered him. He saw television as a tool, as a resource, and he felt like it was being wasted. And so he began, I don't know all the mechanics, but he began looking into what he could do with it. Mr. Rogers has a quote that I want to go into a little later about feelings and things, about how it matters what we do with them, and I want to go into that a little later. Right now, I want to talk about when he was getting started with his series, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and he covered a lot of different issues. Mr. Rogers didn't believe in violence as a means of entertainment. He also didn't believe it as a way of creating drama. I mean, he related the drama to real world situations, to dealing with people's feelings, with conflict, with real world conflict. And while I believe that still applies to drama shows today that do have small violence and fantasy, I still feel that there are more emotions involved today's entertainment, which make it so relatable. And I like to think in a way that exists because of him. He started something for the better. And he was right in a way. He was so right, in my opinion. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the changes he made for the world. And how and why he did them. I believe the year was 1969. I'd like to show you a clip of when he was speaking to one Senator Pastore on approving funding for higher pay to help raise money for the rest of his show. And it was a big proposal. He was as you can imagine, it was a pretty intimidating situation. But Mr. Rogers, Fred, he really he didn't lose his nerve. He just approached him calmly, and he had a mission. He stuck with it. His focus was on the mission to work with the kids, and he recognized, he related the concern. They both cared about what children are being delivered, entertainment and education. He appealed to his better sense of nature, which is what we should be doing with all people. And obviously he seemed interested, since he wanted to know if he could have a copy of the show. And Fred Rogers, he read off one of the shows, a song of the shows that he wrote once, that talks about dealing with control. He talks about how it matters that feelings are manageable and mentionable, and how it helps children develop easier while dealing with hardships in life, how they can be better people for it. I'd like to show you the clip, please.
And I feel that if we in public television can only make it clear that feelings are mentionable and manageable, we will have done a great service for mental health. I think that it's much more dramatic that two men could be working out their feelings of anger. Much more dramatic than showing something of gunfire.
Truly influential, wasn't it? Mr. Rogers, he was a one-of-a-kind man, even back then, and even today, I think. He wasn't a man easily afraid, or at least he wasn't afraid to do what was right. And he saw what people needed. That's hard. And in case I wasn't clear about what the show was about, it wasn't just dealing with feelings. It was dealing with real-world issues. You know, that they covered topics like war and assassination, they mentioned once, and racism, divorce. Mr. Rogers didn't shy away that there was ugliness in the world, but he found a way to make life look beautiful, even at the worst parts. He didn't want people to deny that they had feelings about these things, but he wanted them to find a way to feel better about them, or at least look at them another way. And to not focus so much on the negative, but be willing to look for the positive in life. That's what he was about. And life can look hopeless, and life... About a year ago, it was just before we all had to stay home, and I understand that this has been very hard for everyone, the stay-at-home order and new changes. It's been very complicated. I'd be lying if I said it was easy for me. But just before it began hitting, I saw a film, which is why I got so focused on Mr. Rogers. There was a film. I won't try to spoil too much, but I will say that in the film I saw footage of an appearance he made on a show back in the 90s. And on this show, he was asked about what people need to do with this attitude of hopelessness. And ever since the stay-at-home order happened, I thought a lot about what I saw in that film and about the clip, the actual clip I found a few months ago, which was incredible. I just wish it's simple, but it makes so much sense. I mean, I wish the world took the time to think like this, and if they do, they don't talk about it, and they should. I'd like you to see what Mr. Rogers had to say.
There's a lot of hopelessness. What do we need to do?
Weighs heavy on all of us, doesn't it?
Yeah?
And there's no simple answer, of course. But if we could, through television programs as well as every other imaginable program, let people know that each one of us is precious. Let everybody know that we have value in this life.
Very few words have ever been as true or as influential, in my opinion, as those that we've just heard. Because honestly, as someone who knows how hard it is to find self-acceptance or self-value in oneself, I agree with that. If we can use every resource to let all people know, especially given the situation that we're all living in now, that all people matter. Whatever we do, whoever we are, I believe that humanity can come together. I believe that there is little, if anything, we can't accomplish. I have to believe that. I do believe that. Reverend Rogers, Mr. Rogers, had a way of seeing the best in everyone, and he wanted to promote that. He didn't see hate for no reason that other people did. In fact, when I was learning a bit about him, I saw a clip of his old show where there was an officer of African American descent, I believe, and you have to understand at the time there was a lot of tension between there was a lot of racism in those days. He asked an actor to come on the show, and he was having a hot day, and he was cooling his feet in the pool. And well, why don't you take a look? You'll see what I'm getting at.
It looks awfully enjoyable, but I don't have a towel or anything.
Oh, you share mine.
Okay.
Sure.
Oh,
Come along,
man.
I'll put some more water in here.
Oh. This is going to turn into a beautiful day.
You like bare feet?
Well, yeah, as I grew older, I liked it more and more.
Uh-huh. Good for you. You're pulling up your pants. I forgot to do that.
Fred Rogers knew how to use simple acts to get messages across. And I think that's one of the best things about him. He always found simple yet respectful ways to promote the best in people and to only encourage love for each other, never hate. That's a hard thing to do for anyone, whatever your career or position in this world. Both, even back then and now, especially now. Speaking of love, I'd like to take a little break from Mr. Rogers. I'd like to talk about Sarah Joanne Rogers. Her legal name, everyone called her Joanne, especially the man who would become her husband. Like her husband, like Fred, Joanne Rogers had a degree in music. She studied piano. In fact, it was how they met. Fred had already earned a degree in Pittsburgh, bachelor's degree, I believe, in music. It was just before he discovered television. And what happened was he wasn't satisfied, I think, with his current situation. It was either college he transferred out of or he wanted to take a break from the show. and he ended up going to Dartmouth school in Florida for his third degree of pastorship. And he ended up meeting Joanne, and they became very close. And, you know, he had to leave. He was being involved in the show, and she was continuing her education. And from what I hear, it went very well because for 30 years, you know, her husband, Fred, had his life. She still had hers. She was a professional pianist for 30 years, from 1976 to 2008. And that was with, I believe, her partner, a colleague from school. That's very impressive, I have to say. That's not an easy task, especially since 5 of those years, I believe, were after Fred would have passed away. I can't imagine how hard that would have been. That's no easy task to share life with someone for as long as they did, and then try to rebuild a life for yourself, to figure out your next step, what to do with the rest of your life. I can't imagine, but I like to think that she spent it well, both for herself and her family. I send well wishes to her sons and grandchildren, their sons and grandchildren. And while they stayed in touch for a while, they called, wrote letters, and long distance relationships, they say, usually don't work out, but I'm very glad they did for these two because of the very cute story I heard of how Fred asked Joanne a very certain question.
So we would write, not regularly, but he would write and occasionally talk on the phone. That was expensive, you know. Right. So he wrote me a letter the year that I was getting my degree and asked if I would marry him in the letter. So I went to a phone booth and called him.
That is one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. Fred and Joanne shared a life for 50 years in marriage before he died. It's a beautiful thing. Not many people can say they've been married 50 years. Fred loved her so much that he even passed on a presidential award to celebrate their 50th anniversary. That is a true testament of love, I like to think, and a true testament to a person's character. Joanne went on many interviews, especially after her husband passed away, over 17 years, hard to imagine. And she would always tell people that her husband wasn't a saint. Well, she was right. Fred Rogers was a man, a human being, like anyone else. But I like to think he was the kind of person we'd all want to be. Maybe a person we can all learn to be. She said once, in a view with a journalist, that she's pretty confident that there are other Mr. Rogerses out there. I like to think so. I mean, he worked at his life. It was a practice. For the past year or so, maybe even 2 years coming up, before I even learned his lessons, I have learned that to be true. Life itself is a practice of knowing the best and worst ways to be who you are. Life is a practice of learning how to be the best person you can. I like to think maybe that was his ultimate lesson. never thought about that until now. Life is an ever-going practice. I guess so. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me, but before I do let you go, I wanted to bring up something I mentioned earlier. I told you that Fred had his on view of fame. He didn't consider himself celebrity. He said, fame is a four-letter word, like tape or Zoom or face. What ultimately matters is what we do with it. And like anyone, autism, Asperger or not, what matters is what we do with it. And feeling stress, anxiety, anger, I completely understand how, like with fame or with everything Fred felt or had, what he did with it, he tried to find new positive ways to deal with them, to deal with feelings. And I like to think that maybe that's the ultimate lesson for people like me, for people who have similar struggles and challenges. Finding what we can do with those feelings. Thank you, Fred, for teaching us that. Before we go, there was something Fred did once, and maybe even a few other times, when he was indicted in the Television Hall of Fame in 1997. He asked if the audience would join him for 10 seconds of silence and think about all the people that they cared about that couldn't be with them and who loved them into being. And since this is about Fred and Joanne, I'd like you to join me for 20 seconds of silence. I'll keep track of the time. Whoever you've been thinking about, whether they're here with you today or far away, they may be in the net, they may have passed on. How honored, how truly humbled and filled with love that they must feel knowing the impact they had in your life and how you care for them, how you consider them one of the reasons that you became who you were. I believe that I've learned that life is complicated and messy, but beautiful as well. I've recently learned that a life is defined by the influence and the impact we give to people. Who we are, I believe, can be said by who we make other people want to be. That is the true testament to a person's character. Friend Joanne made me think of that. If Joanne hadn't taken over Fred's foundation and spoken out about him in TED Talks and interviews and shows, I might never have found it. They took care of each other and their children and grandchildren and their lives and the people that they inspired, including myself. I'm very grateful. And I'm very grateful to you today for being here and making this a special day by just being who you are, as Fred would say. And that's exactly who I want you to be. You owe it to yourself. Fred Rogers would say at the end of every show that there's no one in the world like you, and I like you just the way you are. I'm inclined to agree, but instead of wanting to say that, I feel I have to say that you should like who you are, because no one else can think like you or do what you're capable of. And when you recognize and master the gifts you're given, what you were put on this earth to do, your role, and I believe everyone has a role, is put on this earth with a gift and a purpose. If you are willing to look and find it, I believe that you can do wonderful things, and you can find the best version of yourself, something more beautiful than you could ever imagine. I want to thank you all for joining me. You can leave a comment, like or dislike the video. Feel free to subscribe. Check out other videos, past and, well, I want to say present, but this is what you're looking at right now, or future. I feel like someone out of a Christmas Carol singing that, one of the three fates. Anyway, I want to thank you all. Thank you for sharing this with me. This has been a wonderful, wonderful occasion. I'll see you next time.